To another video, Purple Political Talk here. Today is Tuesday, August 3rd, 2021, and today we're going to be discussing the state of Texas and discussing when can Texas go blue. And we're also going to be discussing a lot of different factors like current trends, different data that we have from the state of Texas, and take a look and craft up a general idea of when I think Texas can go blue, and also discuss what needs to happen from here to then for Texas to actually go blue. But before we do begin the video, I want to remind you guys to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to be up to date with our latest content. And I also want to remind you guys to that channel memberships are now open if you would like to help out and support the channel. Channel memberships are just such a great way to do that. So you can become a channel member and support the channel. Like David Maxwell and Adam Hurst, who are our Political Talk channel members, we really could not do it without them, and I really want to give them a big shout out. But now that we've gotten all of the housekeeping out of the way, let's get started with the video. So, Texas is a state that politically has been pretty weird, in the last couple of years. We've seen it completely shift, right, from 2016, where we had the 2016 results in Texas where Trump beat Hillary Clinton by nearly 10 points. It was 9% margin exactly. We saw it go down in 2020 to around a near 7.5% margin. But one of the interesting things is that we have a very close Senate race in 2018. So we're seeing that there's certainly some trends in Texas that at a general level, certain candidates are able to win by more. And I think it really comes down to candidate choice. For Texas to go blue in the future, running the right candidate is going to have a huge impact on the possibility of that happening. Without the right candidate, you're going to see a very tough, uphill battle for the Democrats. So I think that, the best example of this, for example, is the 2018 U.S. Senate election in the state of Texas, where we saw Ted Cruz narrowly edge out Beto O'Rourke in the state of Texas. It was a race that came, closer than 2.6%. That was the margin that Beto O'Rourke lost by. And I think that this just shows us and opens up the possibilities of this race. And the Democrats in the future, end up winning in the state. And I think it comes down to their strategy. We see in this race how they really, they got the margins down in the southern counties. They ran up those margins, and they also did immensely well in these suburbs. They did well in Harris, in Fort Bend County. They did well in Travis County, Williamson. They did well in Hayes, in Medina County, in Bexar County, in Frio County, and this is getting down to the, Frio County, to the southern counties. And then you also have, Dallas, which is, I would say, the most crucial area for the Democrats to run up their margins for them to win come in the future in the state of Texas. I think the state of Texas and it going blue, I think it certainly is, I think it's a lot closer than we may think, but a lot further away than a lot of people may project. A lot of people think Texas will go blue in the 2022 governor's race. People say it will go blue in 2024. And to that, I say, well, I don't really think so. I think that for Texas to go blue, a lot of things need to happen in favor of the Democrats. Incumbent needs to be popular nationwide, because remember, incumbents in the White House and controlling Congress, that has an impact on down ballot races, which I think is where I think, we're going to start seeing the first signs of a blue Texas. But, the Democrats have to be generally popular, which the way that things are going with how rocky Biden's administration has been, and just taking a look at the current political environment where we see the Democrats are not in good favor. They're unlikely to, at this point, I would say, to win at least the House of Representatives. And if they win the Senate, it's going to be very narrowly. Those narrow victories for the Democrats are going to be very detrimental to their future chances in Texas, because they need to have solid control and be very popular. Which, moving forward with Kamala Harris bound to take over the Democratic Party, I really doubt she could win the state of Texas. So I think that at least at the presidential level, we're probably looking at minimum 2028. And I think that the trends that we see kind of show us why it's probably going to take a little bit longer. If we take a look at this extremely detailed map of Texas, we're going to take a look at individual parts of Texas and see where the trends are happening and really what's going on. So just what we can see, point blank, is that at a rural areas, the state just becomes more polarized, we see how the red areas got a lot more red. They got extremely red compared to 2016. The support for the Republican Party is increasing in these rural areas, and if the Republican Party is able to run up the margins in these counties, that's going to offset some of these areas, which I think this is the biggest roadway for the Democrats to win in Texas. Let's just zoom into some of the big cities. For example, Dallas. We see how in Dallas we have the suburbs, most of the suburbs, voting, solidly for the Democratic Party. These are very high population areas of the country, or actually of the state of Texas, that, they have a lot of people. And in the past, the Democrats have not been able to, come in and win. And if we take a look at the change for 2016 map, this is one of my favorite maps for those of you that do not know, the New York Times, an extremely detailed map of the 2020 election. It really shows us how, precinct by precinct, a lot of these races change. Texas is one of the states where we really can see the big change. We see in the suburbs where most of the people live, completely blue, plus 9.7, plus 5, plus 2.7. We see these big changes. Let's go to other suburban areas, and we're going to see the same effect. If we go down to, let's go to Austin. Austin is a growing, city in Texas where you have a lot of college-educated voters moving in, starting to, influence the electorate in this state where you have a lot of college-educated voters. And this is a part of Texas that's actually growing, where you see these college-educated voters voting for Democrats. People that wouldn't before vote for Democrats now are voting for Democrats. Take a look at Austin, completely blue. There's very small parts, and I'm going to talk about these small areas in the cities that are trending red, but again, suburbs, completely blue. San Antonio, suburbs, completely blue. That's a big trend that we're seeing. Now, Houston is another example of that, completely blue. So we're seeing that the Democrats are building ground in these suburban areas, and that's a big area they need to gain support, because moving forward, for them to flip Texas, they're going to have to not only gain the suburban support, but win elsewhere as well. And I think this is going to be their, this is where they're going to need to do better. If we take a look at, for example, the bottom belt of the state of Texas near the Rio Grande Valley, what is something that we can see? There is a lot of red on this map. This is an area that the Democrats used to have pretty good support, and this is one of the areas that a lot of people thought, well, the Democrats need to win here. And I think if it wasn't for the Rio Grande Valley sliding for the Democrats as bad as it did, I think we probably could have seen Biden get within a couple percentage points of winning Texas. 2%, 3%. This is truly what ended up affecting Hispanics in the Rio Grande Valley. And this is going to be the biggest roadblock for Democrats moving forward, where you have Democrats that, they really can't appeal to the Hispanic voters. I think this whole socialism message, it might be popular in some white suburbs, but when you start looking at minority areas, which we're also going to get into the urban areas, because I think that's another big trend that people need to take a look at, and getting into these, Latino, like mostly Latino and, rural areas, we're seeing, that political, the polarization getting stronger. Now, to the point I wanted to make about, urban areas, we're going to go to downtown Houston. All of this right here. Pretty much downtown Houston, which is African American, and then also, parts Hispanic. What is something we can see here? A lot of red on this map. And I think that moving forward, if the Democrats continue to slide in these, inner city parts of the state, let's take a look at another example. Let's take a look at San Antonio. We can see a minor flip in Austin, but that's not that bad as the one that we saw in Houston. Let's go to Dallas. I think we saw a pretty big one here in Dallas. We saw in Dallas how in the inner areas of the city, where a lot of minorities live, those areas are flipping towards, towards the Republicans. Or they're not flipping, the counties haven't flipped, or precincts haven't flipped themselves. But a lot of votes have flipped. And I think for moving forward for the Democrats, that's something that's going to be dangerous. The Democrats need to hold every single vote they have in Texas right now and gain some more to end up winning in the state. And I think moving forward, that's really what's going to, create that time game for them. Because yes, they're winning in these suburbs. They're flipping these suburbs. Dallas, San Antonio, Houston. We saw it with Beto O'Rourke in its Senate results. We saw how he carried these counties that didn't go, Democratic before. He did very well down south. and he did moderately better in some of these rural counties, which in Texas, these rural counties are small, but they do end up adding up because of how many they are, just the sheer size of the state. So I do think that, there is certainly a pathway for the Democrats to get there. Now, it being used, I don't think, at least at a statewide level, I would say probably 2026, I think at the earliest, at a statewide Senate race, probably that would be probably the easiest pathway for the Democrats to end up winning a race, John Cornyn's seat. But actually moving forward, I do think that it's going to take a long time for them to, solidify their support in the suburb enough to the point where they could really end up, gaining enough support elsewhere in the state so you make up some of the margins lost in other parts. So, the state of Texas, again, like I said at the beginning of the video, is a state that is probably closer than we think to flipping, but it's a lot later than a lot of people project. So, truly, there's a lot of things to wait. And I don't think Texas will go blue in 2022. I do not think Texas will go blue in 2024. At this point, where the data falls, with how politically, the country currently stands, the Democrats not being in the best position. They're not in the same position they were in 2018, certainly. So I do think that it's going to have some influence on whether Texas goes blue in this election cycle or in future election cycles. So remember, there's a lot of moving pieces, but just from what we can see now, that's what I think. So tell me guys what you think about this video down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a huge thumbs up, like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to be up to date with our latest content. And if you enjoyed the video, again, please give it a huge thumbs up. And today, August 3rd, I will be going live for the Ohio 11th Congressional District primaries. That's going to be a very interesting live stream. So if you guys can join me, that would be awesome, at 7:20 p.m. Eastern time. So again, thank you guys so much for watching, and goodbye.